Was Secretary Harvey sacked? Mick.
Absolutely. There's no question about it. Pentagon officials say that Secretary Harvey was forced to resign in light of this scandal at Walter Reed outpatient facilities. And, you know, from day one, Secretary Gates has been demanding accountability. He wanted to see those responsible for some of those deplorable conditions that wounded soldiers had to suffer at the Walter Reed outpatient facility. And today he got it. But we're told that the straw that broke the camel's back and forced Harvey's resignation was the fact that after the commander at Walter Reed, Major General George Waitman, was relieved of his command, the Army then put a former commander at Walter Reed, Lt General Kevin Kiley, who is the Army Surgeon General, into command. But many see Kiley as one of the problems in the conditions out there at Walter Reed. And just last week, Kiley, when he was escorting reporters around that infamous Building 18, appeared to play down the seriousness of the conditions that were found there, that some of those soldiers recuperating from fresh wounds had to suffer. There was another announcement on the heels of the announcement of the forced resignation of Harvey, in that Major General Eric Schoomaker will now be the commander at Walter Reed Hospital, not Lieutenant General Kevin Kiley. Eric Schoomaker, by the way, is the brother of General Pete Schoomaker, who's the Chief of Staff of the Army. But we're also told that this will probably not be the last head to roll.
So the first head to roll was the commander out there at Walter Reed, and then when Secretary Gates saw that the new man coming in was the old man, the guy who even before the current guy who was knocked off was the guy who was holding up the problem, apparently back to, what, 2003 when he first got complaints about the situation out there.
Exactly, 2003, 2004. And in his statement today, in a statement yesterday, actually, it was sort of the precursor. You got the signal from Gates yesterday that he wasn't happy with the way the Army was handling this. And today, he said that he was disappointed that so few people were willing to step forward and take responsibility, and that he thought the Army was being much too defensive over the situation at Walter Reed, instead of, you know, taking the bull by the horns and saying, look, this is not right, we're going to fix it, and we're going to hold those people responsible accountable. One of those, you know, the rumors are rampant among Army officials, is that Lieutenant General Kiley himself may be forced to step down.
Well, this is one of the advantages of bringing in a new guy like Bob Gates, isn't it? He's able to come in and be the guy with the broom.
We were talking about that earlier on the heels of this Harvey resignation. It seems like this wouldn't have happened during the Rumsfeld reign, that there would have been too many attempts, many here in the building believe, to try to spin it. To try to show that, yes, indeed, the military and the Pentagon does care about the wounded. And there's no question that across the board, particularly at Walter Reed, the primary care for these wounded has been exemplary. But as we find too often, once they get out of that first cycle of medical care, that too many of these wounded and veterans alike simply fall through the bureaucratic cracks.
Here's your Friday hardball question, Mick. Could it mean that Bob Gates has enough swag over there at the Pentagon as the new guy that he can make other big changes, perhaps in the war effort against Iraq, with as much crackle as this one?
Well, so far he appears to be on board with the war effort in Iraq. We haven't seen him deviate too much from the war plan, the surge war plan that was really put together even before he took office. So I think until the time that surge plan in Baghdad is either proven or proven not to work, I think Gates is going to stick with the game plan that is now on the books.
Great story. Thank you very much, NBC's Jim Miklasewski. Dana Priest of the Washington Post first broke this story about the conditions at Walter Reed. She joins us now. Dana, thank you for joining us. I think we just lost her. Anyway, thank you. Dana Priest, that was an amazing interview with Jim Miklasewski over there. Jim, let me take it up back with you. I think we have a communication with you again. Mick, this story, it had two levels. Run through this again. It had two stories. The first story was the Washington Post story that Dana Priest broke that showed the conditions over there in treating people after their initial treatment. And then the second story was the bureaucratic failure to respond. Is that right?
That's absolutely right. And, you know, it appeared to me, because I was actually off during that time period, and I was watching it as an observer from afar, and it looked to me like this was old Army at work. This is the way the old Army would have responded. I thought that they had learned quite a few lessons in terms of putting down scandals. Abu Ghraib, for example, the Army stepped up and really stepped forward and was out front on, once the scandal broke, on delivering the information that the public needed to know. But then I saw them responding to this Walter Reed scandal, and it seemed like it was the old Army at work. And as a matter of fact, one senior military official who I hadn't seen in a while, I said hello, and without even broaching the subject of Walter Reed, he just declared, "We've really screwed this one up, haven't we?"
I think we noticed that here on this program yesterday. We thought on Hardball it was odd that the top guy was bopped, and then the new guy came in was the old guy, the guy who was there when he should have dealt with the thing earlier, and that's Kiley. As you point out, we'll hear more about Kiley.
What was interesting, though, what was interesting, Chris, is that Gates was sending signals out all along. Hey, get on top of this, get control of this, get accountability, and the Army dragged its feet.
Well, it's a lot easier to fire people when you're the new guy, as we've seen so many times in our business. Anyway,
Absolutely.
Thank you, Jim Michalczewski. Let's go right now. We have a clear line to Dana Priest, who is, of course, the great reporter at the Washington Post who broke this story wide open. Dana, thank you for this. This story seems to have a dynamic to it. It's not just that you uncovered the disastrous treatment of those people out there, but the bureaucratic laxitude.
Well, you know, Kristen, you've not asked the question I thought you were going to ask, which is the political one, because really this thing has legs for two reasons. One is that people in the country who write us have been writing the White House outraged at the treatment of soldiers. But the other thing is that the Democrats have really seized this as an issue, and they have lined up two investigations, one on Monday at Walter Reed and one on Tuesday in the Senate Armed Services Committee. And I have heard from Republicans who are calling me, who doesn't cover politics, that there's a scramble within the Republican Party and that the White House is feeling some heat on this, and that is part of this. In fact, Pentagon people in the civilian ranks over there have told me the same thing, that they're trying to get ahead of this. And as you know, the president is going to announce a new commission. The other thing is not to forget about who this is all about, which is the soldiers. I've been trying to keep in contact with those people I can, and they really feel a large extent emboldened by what they are seeing swirling around them. And they are, a number of them, preparing to testify. These are people that are not public figures, that are maimed in some cases from war, and never thought that they would be in the spotlight, and are stepping up to be in the spotlight and to tell about the conditions there. So I think people in general that I'm hearing from, at least, are very strong-willed now about the changes, and I think they're going to hold the command's feet to the fire as best they can as well.
How does that square with the word we got in your paper the other day that they're being told they have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, be ready for these assemblies, and they're being gagged when it comes to speaking to the press? Where's that stand?
Well, they've now stood down on the daily inspections, and now they've said they're going to do random inspections. I don't know if that's any better, but it does mean that not everybody has to get up every day at that early hour. As for the gagging, you know, I do think that they're going to try to do that, and you may see fewer new names in the paper as a result. But again, from what I'm hearing, people are steadfast about getting things changed, and they're very happy that there is all this attention. The staff at Walter Reed, I think, feel more mixed about it. Many of them respected General Waitman. You know, he hadn't been there all that long. He got there in August, and so a lot of people were sad that he had to take the fall first. And again, as you've pointed out, and we have earlier, that General Kiley is really the subject of a lot of their angst and criticism.
Well, there are two towers that have fallen here. The first tower was General Waitman, who went down because of the overall scandal. He was resigning. He resigned the other day. And now Kevin Kiley, that was because of a Washington Post story, your story, of the scandal itself and the bad treatment of these prisoners who had been there for several months. And now the second story was, I believe it was your reporting that led to the fact that General Kiley, who was the previous top man out there, he was getting reports as of 2003 as to a problem out there, and he kicked it down to his master sergeant, and that was the end of it. isn't that your story?
Right.
And isn't that what led to the second action, the firing basically today of the Secretary of the Army?
Well, I do think that upset the Secretary Gates, and yes, he had General Kiley had heard things as far back as '03, and as best we can determine, he had dismissed a lot of those, and so he was not seen. And then he came out as pretty defensive when the stories broke.
Yeah.
And as you saw today, Gates used the word defensive to speak about the Army. But again, I'll point out that what Gates did today is really a political move, because the president appoints the Army Secretary. He's responsible to the president, and so I think they've all jumped in this now.
To make your point, this is what Secretary Gates had to say later. He said, "I'm also concerned that some do not properly understand the need to communicate to the wounded and their families that we have no higher priority than their care." So a lot of this is the sense, I guess, of dissatisfaction, and anger, and frustration by the families, and he doesn't like the looks of that, Secretary Gates.
Right, and on the Post, I think if you went back and looked at what General Kiley said during his one news press conference that he held over at Building 18, he all but dismissed the accounts, not completely. And there's this general feeling in the Army, at Walter Reed in particular, but elsewhere throughout the country where these outpatients exist, that this is, to put it in their words, you have to suck it up. I mean, we hear that over and over again from people, that that's what they get from their commanders, and it's really a meshing of cultures that don't go well together. One is the soldiering culture, and the other is the patient culture of wounded people who feel like they need to put that first.
Well, you're the one that blew the lid off this Walter Reed story. I guess we'll call it Waltergate.